Hey everybody. Today I'm making a video to explain how you can choose, how you can build a list of schools if you're thinking pre-med in college. So when I was applying to college, 5, 6, 7 years ago, this was actually a big question that I had because it's not really easy to figure out what is a good pre-med school to apply for, to go to, and then a lot of a lot of people ask me, when they get into certain colleges, which one should I choose if I want to be pre-med? And I have a lot of advice to give, but it's a lot easier to just make this video and kind of explain the thought process. So when you're I'm going to make this video from the perspective of, you're a high school senior and you're thinking of which schools to apply for. What factors do you want to consider? And so the first thing that I want to mention is that, the pre-med school doesn't actually matter as much as you think it does. What really matters is how hard you work as a pre-med, how good of a GPA you have, what types of extracurriculars are you doing, can you get involved in research? And I think the number one differentiator is you're going to be your MCAT score, which is kind of like actually tells the school, actually tells the medical school, like how well do you know the science information. And so I go to a top 10 medical school right now, and I can tell you that there's not really a big difference between the people who went to Harvard versus the people who went to community school because everybody got, a top tier MCAT score, and they had tons of, like, hundreds and thousands of hours of clinical experience, and so they're all really well prepared for the rigors of med school. And so kind of ultimately, this is not the prestige of the school you're going to or the resources that it has doesn't really matter as much as how hard you work and what you make of the resources. That being said, it does help a lot if you go to a great pre-med school that kind of prepares you really well for med school and gives you a lot of opportunities to get out there and get clinical experience. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Okay, so the first thing is the reputation of the school. I just said that it doesn't matter that much, but it does still matter. If you're going to like Harvard or Johns Hopkins or UPenn or, one of the great schools that have like a lot of reputation, it does help in your med school application. It's really easy to be like, okay, the student went to Johns Hopkins. They must have a pretty good application. And so the reputation does help. Again, it's not everything, so don't be worried about, if you're not going to a well-known school, then um, it's totally fine. So the reputation of the school, I always wonder what does that really mean? So the first thing is, do people know about it? The second thing is are they associated with a medical school that is really well renowned? So, if you're going to like Case Western, that there's a really well renowned medical school that's associated with it. If you're going to Rice, Baylor is a really well renowned medical school. Um, if you're going to Harvard, Massachusetts General is a great hospital. If you're going to Johns Hopkins, that med school is really great. If you're going to WashU, that med school is really great. So the reputation, you can also look at kind of the research ranking of the medical school, and that'll also give you a good idea of like the reputation of that pre-medical school. So that's a like pretty helpful metric. Again, it's not everything, so don't worry if you're not going to a school that's super super high on the reputation. The second thing is location, and what I mean by location is two things. So the first is like the typical, well, are you going to be going to a place that's close or far from family? What's the climate like? What's the temperature like? So that's all like well and good. That's usually the general advice that people give. But the more specific advice is kind of the availability of a hospital near you, the availability of healthcare facilities, the availability of doctors, nurses, healthcare staff, volunteer opportunities, opportunities to tutor and kind of mentor, and all these like things that you kind of get, especially in a city and a school that's associated with a hospital. It's just so much easier to get the clinical experience that you need to kind of um, build a really great medical school application. And so the location, just search up on Google Maps and see how far is the medical school and the hospital that's associated with the college that you're applying to. And if it's close by, and you can see that there's tons of volunteer opportunities in that area, that's probably a good location. A general tip is it's probably easier to get volunteer opportunities at a city that has like a lot of under-resourced areas where there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. Those are generally good places where you'll have a lot of healthcare facilities and things like that. Another thing is that it really helps to go to a college that has a medical school that's attached to that college, because that also helps in terms of getting research opportunities, getting hospital opportunities, getting shadowing opportunities, all those sorts of things. And so, like, if I stayed at home where I live and didn't go to a college nearby, then it would be really difficult for me to get access to these healthcare facilities because there's not like a huge hospital system that's nearby. But where I go to medical school, Barnes Jewish is one of the biggest. Washington University, Barnes Jewish is one of the biggest hospitals in the Midwest, and so there's tons and tons of healthcare facilities for the undergraduate students at WashU to kind of get access to these things. So that's kind of what you want to focus on for location. The third thing is curriculum. How well are they preparing you for medical school? Do you have like advanced biology classes? Do you have a curriculum that really lines up well for with the MCAT? Can you ask people who are a few years older than you who go to that school? How's like the average MCAT scores at that school? Like, how are the average students doing after getting, taking all these classes and learning and things like that? Most schools offer research and internships. Just see on their website like what sorts of research and internships they offer. They might give stipends over the summer to do internships, all these things. And so any school that kind of offers these things will have a strong pre-med curriculum. Okay, so resources kind of matters too, and this is kind of dependent on are a lot of the kids who are going to that school pre-med, and despite whatever you think about the reputation of that school, if there's a lot of kids, like 50, 60, 70% of the kids who are going to that school who are pre-med, that school is going to have resources that are built for pre-meds. If you're going to a great school but only 5% of kids are pre-meds there, then it's not going to have as much of kind of this support because fewer people need it. Pre-med advisors, tutoring services, study groups to support pre-med students, these are all really important. See if there's a pre-med society that supports pre-meds, reviews applications, things like that. Okay, class size, I don't think this matters as much as people think it does. Some people say that individualized attention at smaller class sizes really, really helps. And I can totally see that, but I can also see, that, larger class size is completely fine if you're just working hard. I think the one big benefit of having a smaller class size is kind of that it's a lot easier to get a letter of recommendation from a class that has 10 kids rather than a class that has 300 kids. So all my letters of recommendation from college were all from, really small size classes where I actually knew the professor, not the classes which were like general chemistry where I had 300 people in the same room. So it's a lot easier to get those types of letters of recommendation. MCAT preparation is like a big deal. Probably shouldn't have it this far down, but MCAT preparation is kind of like my school actually offered MCAT course. You had to pay for it, but it was an MCAT course taught by the MD PhD students at Washington Med School, and that was like a really good preparation for the MCAT because I was getting taught by people who had taken the MCAT, gotten like 99th or 100 percentile scores, and I was feeling like pretty well prepared for the MCAT. And so if there's like if the students who go to that school have pretty high MCAT scores, or are really well prepared for the MCAT based on the pre-med courses that they're taking at that school, then that's a good indication that that's a good school. Okay, admission requirements. So you want to make sure that something that I didn't realize is that I had a lot of AP credits from high school and I didn't get to transfer a lot of them over. And so if you're kind of like uh, if you kind of like need to take some classes and that school doesn't really offer those classes or things like that, then that's kind of important. This is kind of like you just need to make sure that you're taking all the classes for the med school application possible. Okay, extracurricular opportunities are pretty important. So if there's a hospital nearby, it's pretty easy to get involved in volunteering in the hospital or shadowing in the hospital. It's pretty easy to just cold email doctors and ask them if you can shadow them. If you have a medical school that's attached to your college, then it's pretty easy to get into a research lab where you can do clinical or basic science research. So, those are kind of really important things to consider as well. If you're really interested in going to a place that's diverse and inclusive, then that's something you can also search up in the website statistics. And finally, the cost. A lot of people say like, should I just go to the cheapest school? And I think that's a perfectly fine strategy, just going to the cheapest pre-med school, especially because med school is really expensive. And so 8 years of paying like a really high tuition is pretty expensive for a lot of people. So, if you want to go to like whatever the cheapest school is, I'm sure that you'll be able to make up for maybe not going for as high of a reputation school if you're kind of working really hard in your pre-med years and doing really well on the MCAT. So yeah, see if you can get like financial aid or scholarship as a pre-med because that helps a lot in terms of everything. But ultimately, that's up to you. Balancing like the value of the school versus the cost of the school and figuring out which one works best for you. But that's kind of my breakdown of what makes a good school if you're thinking pre-med in college. And I really hope that this helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'll get back to you and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.